I'd like to share with you some actionable tips on how to sell yourself well in job interviews. I'm going to focus my presentation on the main mistakes that candidates make that prevent them from selling themselves well in job interviews. The first one is over-templating. That is trying to fit ad literam in the star format, or even worse. If you ask the AI for feedback on how to improve your star answers, it will always present to you with some learnings. So presenting your learnings in 100% of your star answers is also a terrible idea. Sometimes it doesn't even make sense. So what I would recommend you here would be to try to come up with your own format. For example, the DAN format, description, action, and some nuggets. And what you'll observe is that whatever format you choose to present your answers, all these formats will sound as if they're structured, and they're structured not necessarily primarily in the star format, but they're structured well enough to bring in clarity during your job interview. Now, of course, for a fresher, the star format is perfectly fine, but I'm speaking the more you advance in seniority, the expectation is that your own format will help you to sell yourself best in job interviews. The next thing I'd like to talk about here, it would be over-trying to fit into a company's cultural values. And to present you a little story here, I once helped the director of global branding with Netflix get hired there. And the core reason they hired me because I published a YouTube video with Netflix Culture Deck. And the reasoning was that hey, if Dan shared the video with the Netflix Culture Deck, Dan is an insider in Netflix's job interviews. So basically my main contribution to this client of mine was to convince them, hey, you know what, it's all about your answers and improving your answers primarily. And then, if you want to mention a few keywords here and there from the Netflix Culture Deck, that's fine, but that's something extra which doesn't really correlate with your interview successes. Now, more notable examples would be for companies such as Amazon. Trying to fit into Amazon's leadership principles might not end as well as you expect it to. Of course, you can prepare on them, but if you want to know how the best performers land jobs in these companies, it's not by trying to fit into anyone's culture. On the same lines, oversharing personal experiences, oversharing too much information about even a professional experience that would not play to your advantage. These are things you should seriously reconsider for your job interviews. Personal stories, I would stay away from them, unless, of course, you have maybe some startup you want to mention and these sort of things. But again, oversharing information is generally not to your advantage. Over-making metrics and decisions in job interviews, bluffing, is also has become a sport nowadays. What I can tell you from experience, best candidates stay fundamentally truthful in what they say. And of course, maybe you make some exceptions during the heat of the moment, but it's by no means that you prepare to bluff in job interviews. It really doesn't work this way in interviews with high-performing companies. The next thing would be a major blocker from you selling yourself and performing during job interviews is overthinking your story bank versus role play. So what happens is the following. Some candidates take this approach, the best possible approach to prepare a non-technical behavioral interview, that is to prepare a story bank and role play. And what they end up with is to over-prepare the story bank for 2 weeks, and then 3 days before the interview, let's start role-playing something. And what happens here is during those 3 days, there's very little chance that you're going to be able to communicate the story bank that you prepared for your job interview to build sufficient communication skills. So overthinking the story bank is also something you should stay away from. Or, the fix here, especially if you know yourself that communication isn't a strength, then as soon as you get one story, try to role play it, ideally with an interview coach, to see how it sounds. Because this way you're going to win also on your communication skills, and you'll speed up the process, the brainstorming process as well. Okay? And maybe one more here. Last but not least, over-rehearsing your interview answers can also backfire. what I noticed with some candidates is that by over-rehearsing some interview answers, they became boring. So the candidate lost engagement in basically selling themselves and having the best possible energy and positivity while communicating these answers on reasoning, hey, you know what, I said this 10 times before. So my suggestion is that you only rehearse it until you know it's right. Okay, so you build sufficient communication skills. You don't have to overdo these things either. So I hope you found this useful, and thank you very much for watching.